That's when people don't sell. When rates jump a considerable amount, people don't sell simply because they will lose that significantly lower interest rate. That is true. But ultimately, is that enough to make a ship unsinkable?
It's time for the Creative Real Estate Podcast, your source for out-of-the-box real estate investing strategies, brought to you by ecospace.com. Now, here's your hosts, Adam and Jason.
Welcome to the Creative Real Estate Podcast. I am your co-host, Jason J. Lewis. And today, I'm going to dive into a topic that involves the Titanic. Yes, you're hearing that correctly. I'm going to dive into some things in our history, including the Titanic, that might help an investor, a broker, an advisor, a homeowner consider things in maybe a different way than what the narrative that's being pushed out there today is. So some of these topics, some of the things I might bring up definitely are not super positive events in our history. I definitely in no way comparing these events to what's going on or what can happen or real estate, in no way comparing, just wanting to share events that have happened that ultimately people said and thought never could happen. And they did happen. So that's my goal today is, why real estate and the Titanic have in common. Essentially, what do they have in common? That's my goal today. And the goal is to open up your mind. And this is a belief. This is just myself. I could be completely wrong. I fully understand that. But things can happen that people say cannot. So let's start with the Titanic. Essentially, this ship was unsinkable. It was the ship that was the hot thing to happen. You had to get, if you were anyone, you were going to be on that inaugural cruise that it took, a journey trip. And it was one of these magical, majestic, so many words you can fill in, that ultimately was the best ship ever produced. And as you know, it sunk. Negatively, a lot of lives were lost and a lot of lives were negatively affected. But ultimately, it was something that, quote, shouldn't have happened, quote, couldn't have happened. Everything that was being pushed out there, the news, the media, all the newspapers at the time, was saying how this was the unsinkable ship. So what they're saying after is, sadly, is that the sinking of the Titanic ended an era of innocence and arrogance. That, my friends, is a very bold statement. And honestly, it's one that I don't think held true. Maybe at the time, maybe for a few years afterwards, an era of innocence and arrogance ended. But human nature, you shortly forget. History can repeat itself on times because ultimately the human brain forgets what it wants to and believes in what it wants to. So 2008 was an era of innocence and arrogance. The stock market, the real estate market, the economy, it can't tank. It is strong. It can only go up. And because of that, ultimately, it did stop. It did end at that time. I'm definitely not comparing 2008 or the Titanic to today's 2022 real estate market and overall economy, but I'm hearing more and more that when people are starting to freak out a little bit, starting to question things, the gurus come on there, the newspaper, the articles, everyone says, nope, it's different this time. It can't stop. Some of those reasons, millennials, the highest number of buyers or the highest number of the population is becoming millennials, and they are your next subset of buyers. So the demand and the amount of buyers in that generation that don't own homes, that ultimately want to own homes, are coming into this market. And now with so little supply, there's just no way that it can, in '08, another quote, kind of Titanic can happen because this time it is the strongest that we've had. It's impenetrable. So also, no one wants to sell. I hear that. Well, no one's going to sell. And I do hear this. Historically, this is a point that's kind of happened in multiple times in our history is rate lock. So that's when people don't sell when rates jump a considerable amount. People don't sell simply because they will lose that significantly lower interest rate. That is true. But ultimately, is that enough to make a ship unsinkable? Consumer balance sheets are as strong as they've ever been. But on the flip side, I hear that student debt is the highest it's ever been. The last few months, reports have been coming out that overall savings is the lowest it's ever been. So is that ship unsinkable? Private equity. Now this is the one. This is the reason I hear a lot. Private equity was not around in 2008. Single family homes were not an asset investment class for Wall Street, for private equity groups, for hedge funds. So it's different this time. The ship is unsinkable because of that. But I question that because was Wall Street, private equity, hedge funds in commercial real estate in '08? The answer is yes. That is what drives primarily commercial real estate, is the large institutional owners. Did commercial real estate get affected in '08? The answer is yes. I was in it. I was a commercial real estate broker at that time. And I had an older gentleman cry because his entire investment or retirement was put into an office building complex. And that building ultimately got foreclosed on and went through bankruptcy. So there were private equity, hedge funds, all of that in there at that time. And that ship did sink. Then there's others. There's so much equity. There's so much equity the last few years that no one is upside down, that if things start to soften, that they have so much equity that they can weather the storm. So I'm not sure really how to respond to that other than like, if that equity, that big run up that we've had, if it's run up that fast, what could say that it couldn't do the same going back? It literally did it that quick going up. So why can't it go down? So is that ship, because there's so much equity, the equity ship, is that makes the market unsinkable? So those are some things I'm hearing why this market will not get affected moving forward. But again, historically, they said that about Titanic. I don't even know if I really want to share this because it really isn't in any league at all in comparison to real estate. But like the Holocaust, I just reading history of times in our life during New Age kind of era, that in the last reasonable amount of time in our history, this isn't hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's years ago. There was one gentleman that they say, the questions were like, how can one person cause and have so much evil? This is a recent and overall length of our history. This is a pretty recent historical event, and it happened. I mean, you can't, if you really think about it, like, how could that have happened? Like, how can you fathom something that terrible happening? And yet, in somewhat recent history, it did. So, some positive things is, we got to the moon. Did anyone back in the day think, oh, there's no way a person can get to the moon, fly to space? It happened. Things can happen that people believe never can, and things in a negative way also can. So did you really think in today's era, 2020, that a virus could completely shut down our entire economy, our society, our businesses, our schools? Complete shutdown in today's era where we have so many kind of unpenetrable ships in place to protect us from those things, just from the government and all the testing and all of the medication and all of the vaccines and this and that. Whether you believe in it or not, I'm taking all political out of it, but something did happen to cause our economy and society to stop. So when you see these things of the market can't go down because of X, because of Y, like these are things that somewhat can potentially happen because some of these things I've listed off are so much more unlikely to happen that have happened. So that's kind of my little, I don't know if it's a rant, it's a little soapbox for the day, but it's a challenge for you, wherever you are in your real estate career, to just take a step back. And when people say something can't happen, you don't have to voice it out there. You don't have to argue. You don't have to get on the Facebook or social media and get into those rants. Save that time and energy to learn, look back in history and make your own decision, and ultimately maybe prepare for what you believe might or might not happen. So save that energy, put it towards yourself, making sure that you're in the best position possible for whatever does happen and whatever you believe or might not happen. So that's my challenge. That's my goal here is when it comes to thinking critically, creatively, thinking, as we say, and I will at the end of this episode, think outside the box. Like, don't be in that Titanic box of this ship is unsinkable. So, because history tells us that sometimes that is incorrect. So that's it for now. Hopefully we're going to get some great guests on here. I'll put out there that I've been absolutely, completely overwhelmed. My co-host Adam Adams has as well. So we're going to get some more guests here the next few months. Really excited for those. So, but right now we're cranking. I got a lot of deals in all aspects of the economy and the real estate. It is still moving forward, but I'm still making sure that when someone says something can't, I question it. So as always, until next time, think outside the box.
Thank you so much for listening to the Creative Real Estate Podcast. And if you got value from this episode of the podcast, please take the time to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Give us a written rating and a review. We'd really, really appreciate it. I'm going to let you go, but until next time, think outside the box.